when you describe them as personal angels, I mean, like, what do you mean? This thing. And also not the one, but several that are
Yes.
part of your team, even. Like,
Yes.
that was wild to me.
Welcome to the Angelic Frequency Podcast. We are your hosts, Cristina Aroche
and Luisa Velez. And today we had a great conversation about spirit guides, but more so about your support team and all the beings that are here with you on this journey and how they're supporting you, how you can communicate with them, our personal experiences with our guides, and the connection with the divine. Yeah, we talked about a little bit of everything.
Oh my gosh, it was such a good conversation. And yeah, let's dive in. We are back for another interesting conversation about spirit teams, spirit guides, the support system that's around us.
Yes, and it's a great follow-up after our guardian angel conversation and how that's just one of the beings that make up your actual team. We all come here, I guess, in good company, and we have a team of beings helping us and supporting us through this. Is very, very hard work, so they're making sure we stay on track. So guardian angels, of course, being sort of the first line support. But there's also spirit guides, and that's what we want to talk about today and where we're taking our conversation. And it's funny how this came about too.
I know.
To be part of it.
It's so crazy how that, like how we even stumbled upon this conversation, because you mentioned a name and you're like, you said, well, how about, okay, I don't know, you say the story, you tell the story.
Yes. So we were just having a conversation, catching up on live, and I happened to I was asking about a different person, an author, and a different connection, but then a different name came out.
Yeah.
Out of the blue. And I just said, like, what happened with Brian?
Yeah.
It was a completely different name. Like, the actual person was a completely different name. Nothing to do with Brian whatsoever. But the name came out. And then you were like, what do you mean? When did I tell you about Brian? What do you mean, Brian? And so that's how
crazy. Yeah, because I was like, how do you know about Brian? Like, I never told you about Brian. So to give everyone the backstory, when I was a little girl, I remember, I was like 4 or 5 years old. I remember having an imaginary friend, and the imaginary friend's name was Brian. And I remember just, like I would just play. I don't know what I was playing, but I just remember playing with Brian. Brian was always there, and I was talking to Brian. And that was that part of my life. And then grew up, blah, blah, blah. Didn't really think much of it for a long, long time. And then at the end of 2016, when I started, I was already kind of on a spiritual awakening journey for about a year before that. But I, at that time in 2016, had started working with a spiritual mentor, and she was just simply leading me on a guided journey, like a guided meditative experience. And in that meditation, I met my spirit guide, whose name was Brian. And I remember in that journey just being like, oh my gosh, is that the same? Like, Brian, like, where's Brian's? Like, that's such a random name to come in. And then I thought, but immediately, in that instant, in that moment, I immediately linked the two together, and I was like, wait a second, that's my imaginary friends, that Brian. Oh my gosh, you're back after all these years. And I remember asking her, like, to confirm. She's like, yeah, like, that was your imaginary friend, was your guide who was with you. And so it's so funny because that happened. Like, that was a thing that happened at the end of 2016. And, haven't really talked or thought about Brian all that much.
Yeah, very recently.
And then you said that
at a time when you were like, at a time where you were something was about to shift, right? So you were about to set out on this path and about to start your work, your spiritual work, let's say.
Yeah.
And now you're kind of at the next, moment when you're also going through a similar transition in life. So he's, I guess, making his presence known to let you know that he's here for that
Yes.
too. That must be his role to some extent.
Yes, exactly, which was so interesting. And it's so interesting how I feel like in general, our guides, the spiritual team that's around us, and this is a common question that I get is like, oh, like, who do I talk to? Or how do I know who? Like, there's a whole team. And it's kind of like trusting that the team is there, but they will show up in very specific moments. And I never realized this about Brian, that he was this guide who comes in during like these pivotal
Yeah.
moments. But now looking back, it kind of makes sense. And it's just so wild. And I do still have to tune in and like see what his message is for me. I haven't sat with it yet and like meditated with him, but I just feel like it's such an obvious call now of like, hey, like he's stepping into the room. Like, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. But to show up and let me know through Luisa, like I never would have, realized it otherwise. So that was
No,
so
that's
crazy.
so crazy. And yeah, spirit guides. I mean, I was sharing this with you as well, that for me, because spirit guides have a different connotation. So for me, an angelic being is an angelic being. It feels really safe. It comes directly from the source, the divine, God, whatever you want to call it. So it's like a safer connection. But then spirit guides, we start to go to a different level, and it's not quite a
Yeah.
your average spirit ghost,
Yeah.
friendly ghost that's going about their ghostly things. But but it's not quite an ascended master. It's somewhere in between,
Hmm.
former human, but
Yep.
on a mission to help humans that are still on this plane. So it's kind of somewhere in between your ascended master and your regular ghost, I
Yeah.
guess.
Exactly.
It's a super
Yeah,
fun.
not quite. They up level from Ghost, but they're not quite
Yeah,
ascended master yet. No.
it's somewhere in between.
Yeah.
But it's fun to think about like that, and how they are also part of your team. They can relate to you also, I guess, more on a very different level. They're a different kind of being. They've been on this plane.
Hmm.
They have a better sense of, what we're dealing with, I think. So they're
Yeah.
closer to the human experience than an angel might
Yes.
be, or an ascended well, they've also been here, but I guess a long time ago. So yeah, very interesting characters here. And I had a hard time, not a hard time, but I never took an interest to connecting with those beings, just because they felt too close to a spirit, a
Yeah.
human spirit. And you just don't know about intentions and what are we
Yeah.
doing here? What's the work that you're doing, and why is this safe? Can I trust this connection? So there's a lot more questions or hesitation for
Yeah.
me to kind of connect with them. Even with ancestors and like anything human is like,
Yeah. Like, what's
I'm
your
not
real
quite
motive here?
sure.
Yeah.
Humans are interesting. I don't know if we're all that good. So anyway, that's my journey. I've also had an imaginary friend experience, but it wasn't a unicorn or anything like that. It was also a human, and it was an older lady, and I called her Miss Claudia. Like,
Mm.
also a very specific name that I was not. It's not an aunt or a friend or any name that I would be necessarily
Mm. Yeah, it's
familiar
like
with.
Brian. It's like what such a
Like a
random.
very random
Yeah.
adult name that I wouldn't necessarily like name that, call that
Yeah.
my imaginary friend that. So anyway, that's one where I have my suspicions. Like, is this a ghost? Was this like
Yeah.
potentially a guide? And then later in life, also at a very particular moment in time, when I started connecting with angels and I started diving into this world, reading, meditating, and calling on archangels and start my work with them, when I started to feel this other presence. And I did get some indications that this was a guide, it was a male energy, and that we've been together for several lifetimes, and we've been talking about soul families, and to our previous episode about that. We've come to this plane together before in many different shapes and forms. And so, and he's in this lifetime, I guess he's not on this side, but he's also part of the journey. And he was supporting me, I guess, at that moment of awakening and connection with the angels. And that was kind of the start of it all. So I guess that's part of it too, that they're here. They're not all the time with us like a guardian angel, but just they're here on a very particular mission and to support us with very particular things that we're doing here.
Yes. Yes. And it's interesting because yeah, it's almost like sometimes they come in as like a catalyst, so to speak,
Mhm.
where it feels like that was a catalyst on your journey to be in connection with the angels and, kind of like that exploration part of your journey. And sometimes spirit guides will have just that one particular mission, we'll call it, or a particular role, and then once they complete it, then they're done, and they're done, and they fulfill what they were supposed to do with you, and they'll move on to whatever they do in spirit land.
That was my question. And I'm not going to ask it now because I just heard the answer, but it's just like, of all the things that one can do with, time after one is done,
Yeah.
like, so that's like, I guess, a job you can take. That's something
Right.
you can do with
Yes.
your afterlife.
Yes, exactly. And then yeah, like you said, sometimes they'll come in for that specific thing and then they kind of move further away, and then when it's time again, like in my example with Brian, it was like he was there, and then I don't think he wasn't not there, just he wasn't as close, or just as, if I think of it, I always think of our guides and angels as kind of like creating these like
Spirit.
circles around us, so to speak, and kind of they take up the ones that are closest to us. We can feel them. They're right next to us. And then they kind of stand further and further back. So he was just more in an outer energy field. And when the time was right, he came in, and then outer energy field again. And now is the time again. Okay, coming back in, and so some guides have that role and some guides don't. And whether it's something that they choose, or I feel like it's probably more something that the divine chooses as part of their
Mm,
roles, kind of like in this moment right now, this is how you're going to come in and this is your specific thing. But it is pretty mind boggling, I think, to
it's
think
wild.
about how it's so intricately connected, and how they know that now is the time, and what do I do with this? And I feel like even just talking about like when you do sense a presence that comes through, well, what do you do with it? Like what do you do next when
Yeah,
you
how
when you
does
feel
one
that?
work with them? And my experience is just that. I had
Yeah.
an indication of, okay, we've been together before, I've worked with you before, whatever. But
Yeah.
I just didn't want to find out more. Again, at that time, I was really a lot of hesitation around, like, I don't know if I trust this.
Right.
This is speaking to me right now, and
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of more information and things. It wasn't the right time, I guess, for me to explore that a little more. But how do you work with guides as opposed to with your angels? How do you establish that communication, and how do you
Mhm.
find out what they're here for and how they're helping you? I guess similar to angels, you just not
It's
doesn't don't necessarily need to know. You just need to let them do their thing.
Yeah, basically, yes. There is, I would say, a step before that, because what you're saying is totally true and very important, in the sense of, well, what is your motive, and what, like, you
Yeah.
come from this human origin, so to speak, which means that they may not necessarily have the highest integrity. Most likely, they are of high integrity, but there are spirit guides that do exist that are not of high integrity. And so it is important to discern that. And I feel like for one, people who are on the journey where they are very much deepening their connection to the angels, and you're like communicating with your guardian angels, and you're really like in that, I do feel like because you have that established connection, it can make it easier to lean into your guardian angels to then be like, what do you think about this character over here? Like, do we approve or not? So leaning into the guides, the angelic guides that you do trust, or even the archangels. I mean, you could call on Archangel Michael and ask, like, what is the integrity level of this energy that's coming forward, and kind of just establishing that as the first base thing, kind of, and you can work with any of the angels, guardian angels, archangels. You can call on them and ask, don't allow this energy to come in if they are not of high integrity. that's just it. And it's creating an energetic boundary is first and foremost.
Mhm.
But I would also say approaching it not from the assumption that they are here to harm you, but from an assumption of just curiosity, and then from there, once that's established, like, I have my energetic boundary. You're not coming in here if you are not of high integrity, but if you do have high integrity, then okay, I'm open to welcoming you in and seeing what you're here to
For
support me with,
guidance. Okay.
for guidance or whatever. Sometimes I've noticed that these beings will come in as, like, the first time they show up, it might just be an awareness thing, like, hey, I'm just letting you know that I'm here. Like, there's not necessarily a message or a guidance at that point. It's just kind of like letting you know that I exist and that I'm here and that I'm one of your guides, type of a thing.
Hmm.
And then again, this is one of those things where it's just so intuitive, so unique and personal to each individual's journey. But then the next thing is that you would, if there is a sense of like, okay, there's something coming through, like, for example, in my case with Brian, my next step, because I know him, and I know who he is, and I know that there's a reason why he's coming forward. So then I just sense that. So then my next step right now is to tune in with him. So you would tune in with the spirit guide that's coming through and kind of just asking, why are you here? Like, what message do you have for me? What do you want me to know? And whether that's in meditation or channel writing or whatever practice you might have, it's beginning to open up that line of conversation or communication, if you feel comfortable with it, and if it's what feels right to you. If it doesn't feel right, then trust that. And we don't have to, it's not like you're going to miss something important. I feel like there'll be a different way. If it's something that you really need to know, or that really is
They'll make
needed,
yeah.
they'll
They'll
make
have
it obvious. So
yeah.
I think that's the key thing too to remember with it. But it definitely is it's a different experience and a different level of discernment that is required when we're working with spirit guides in that way.
Yeah, it's really it's really interesting discerning how and when. And I think we all have kind of that spidey sense. We can all
Yeah,
tell
totally.
that it's something's off when we don't feel safe, when we feel scared, when there's something that just doesn't feel right. Just knowing that we have that support and protection from our angels to just not let that energy in.
Yes.
Um, I'm so curious. I mean, this is all hypothetical and there's no way of knowing, but like, yeah, why a guide and not an angel? And when do they
Yeah, that's
do they
a
work together with their human to, and why does it take one or the other? Like, I'm so curious to just what's their dynamic and understanding that.
yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And the first thing that comes through just as you're saying that is because, in terms of this spirit guide, most of the time, usually 99% of the time, it is a soul contract. So they are here, they're
Oh,
contracted to be with you, to support you, because as much as they're supporting you in your soul's evolution and growth, it's also influencing
part of
theirs. So if you think of it as a team, so think of it, it's exactly the same if you think of like any sports team or any team. Everyone was working together, and if the team is working together to make sure that the team wins in
their.
like a sports game,
Yeah.
then everyone wins. So it's kind of similar in the sense of, if our spirit guides are coming in, they're supporting our journey as the one who is the incarnated human, for you to be able to live in your full potential or to fulfill your purpose or your mission why you're here, then their individual journeys, like if you think of stepping into your purpose and pursuing that highest potential path as a way to your soul's expansion, and how that's the purpose, your soul to expand, then the same thing is happening for them, for their individual journeys, is that they're expanding too alongside with you. So as you work together and you're expanding in your lifetime, they're also expanding on their journeys, and it's kind of like everyone's winning, quote unquote.
Mhm.
You know what I
Okay.
mean?
Yes. Okay, so it's part of their plan to on their evolution as a soul as well. That's so interesting. And then they're not necessarily your ancestors.
Not
Yeah,
necessarily, no.
not necessarily connected like that. Okay. But kind of part of your soul family, or not even? That it can be,
That's a good question. I do feel like they're most likely part of your soul family.
right? Okay.
Yes.
If you had
Yes.
a, again, I just have this one experience, but he was like,
Yeah.
no, we've been together, we've been everything, we've been here. Like
Right.
the feeling I got was like, we've been at this for a long time and we've been together in many different ways. So the it felt like a journey together.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I guess part of the soul family resonates with me.
Yes. Yeah. And that's very common. I feel like that having that experience where maybe you in one time in a lifetime were his spirit guide and you were on the other side and he was
Right.
living a life. You were both incarnated as humans and living some sort of
Uh-huh.
had some sort of connection together. So it's like almost if you think of the different iterations or possibilities of how you could have been together and working together to expand your souls in whatever your specific role or mission was for that lifetime, that it's like that then carries on and carries forward into your present lifetime. So
Mhm.
you kind of have this history
Yeah.
and and that connection, and then it just shows up in different ways, but it's still also building on each other from a previous life. So it's not like you guys are starting from scratch. It's kind of like,
Right.
okay, we did that in that lifetime. Here we are in this lifetime. Let's continue the work that we did
Give
together.
the word. That's so interesting. The more I think about it, the more, yeah, mind boggling it gets. And just like a guardian angel that keeps coming with you, and it's just kind of, it's just that team of
Yeah.
all people working together to make this happen and to get to that goal.
Yes.
Go back
Yes.
home.
Exactly. So then to answer your question about like how do you differentiate or what's the difference between the roles of let's say a spirit guide versus an
Yes.
angelic guide? The angelic guide is more so like when I think about the angels and their purpose, it's not really the same in the sense of trying to expand. Like they're not really trying to wanting to expand or needing to expand because they're already the most expansive version of light and love. So they're more here as a support and helping to influence and to guide and to show us the way and to remind us of our truth and who we are and to bring in more of that practical energy. Like I think I've shared that before of how and instead of it being a question of, what's the answer to this? Like how do I do this or when is this going to happen? It's more so a question of help me to embody this energy, help me to remember who I am. It's more of a active energy process in which the angels support us to reach a certain point or reach a certain level. And so they are working on behalf of divine will. So if you think of divine as God, source, creator, whatever you want to think of it, but that there's this divine will that exists, and that divine will is what is supporting us in terms of our mission, our purpose. They are here on assignment to support that divine will to come into fruition. So they're here to guide us and to support our awakening and like help us see things and help us heal so that we can further divine will's mission, so to speak. Whereas with human, like with spirit guides, it's more so we're part of this divine will, but also we're here on a in a place to expand our souls and to expand our understanding and to expand who we truly are. So it's like a different viewpoint. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like us in our incarnated human and our spirit guides, it's kind of like in the similar sense of we're wanting our souls to expand because there's a certain potential that we're here to accomplish versus angelic guides. They're kind of like they don't they're not trying to expand anywhere. They're already expansive and they're just wanting to guide us into where we're meant to go. I hope that makes sense.
Well, it does make sense. And okay. My next question then is angel. Again, we have sort of our personal angels, our own team. We have collective angels that work with humanity or with lots of people. Is that are there spirit guides are an individual? Is an individual relationship, or do they work with communities or different group
Mm,
of people? Or that would be next level. That would
yeah,
be like the
that's
ascended master.
That's a great question. And I do feel my intuitive feeling is that on a collective, it's more ascended master. Like when it comes to the spirit guides, it's very much connected to the individual. It's very kind of like
Mhm.
personal, how I describe our guardian angels being personal to us versus universal angels like the archangels. So to me, from that perspective, it's ascended master is more of the equivalent to a universal angel. So ascended masters are more the collective. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Makes
yeah.
sense. Yes. I just learned this earlier today actually. I was having a conversation and then about an individual guru person who is able to channel this energy and gives like advice and guidance for a certain
Mhm.
community or just a small
Mhm.
community of people. And so I was curious if that's like along the lines of a spirit guide, or that's more of a, it must be some sort of ascended master that this person is able to channel and that's bringing forth messages for our community.
Or a
But you can go
community.
and consult, you can go and ask about your own personal journey and ask questions and things. So at an individual level. So I was
Right.
like,
I see.
what is that?
That's
Um,
interesting because I've seen that before. Like I've seen it as these collective energies they call
mm,
themselves. What's the thing? Abraham, have you heard of that? Abraham Hicks.
no.
So there's this
Yes.
woman, her
No.
name is Esther Hicks,
Uh-huh.
and she channels what she calls a collective named Abraham. And
Okay.
she's written books and things like that, and she'll like channel those as though Abraham is speaking, and but when she
Yeah.
says Abraham, yeah, like as if they're talking, like
A
she's not.
different voice, different
Yeah, yeah,
demeanor, different.
yeah, yeah. And that's an interesting thing to me. It feels like that is a different, it's almost like, how do I even describe this? Because at that level, I don't feel like they're spirit guides anymore. I don't feel like that's a spirit guide energy. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So the people who are channeling like that, or like these collective energies or whatever the case is, I don't feel like they're spirit guides. They're not angelic guides. It's like different cosmic beings or celestial beings, and I feel like there's a whole rabbit hole that opens up because it's kind of
Yeah.
like, well, what kind of energies are there? Which it's interesting because I never thought about that actually until you just brought that up. Where I'm like, yeah,
There you go.
what energy is Abraham?
What
Like, I don't
is it? Yeah. Just like with angel, I mean, and this is a whole different episode, but just like with angels, you start the deeper you go is like, oh, there's different realms and different roles, and there's more collective
Mm-hmm.
uh, energies or angels that work for the collective, not the individual. And yeah, it's a whole thing. And if you go into like councils and other concepts of just groups of beings, I don't even know how to classify them, ascended masters, guides, whatever, and they have a whole organization up there, and
Yeah.
councils of light that
Yes.
I guess help souls. I don't know. It's a whole thing. It's
Yeah,
very
it's a whole thing. It's just like a whole ginormous rabbit hole that we can dive into and like explore these different, yeah, like you said, types of beings and their roles and how they work with us and are they working collective or individuals. And yeah, it's really interesting. The universe is so vast and wide that there, of course, there's so much that exists out there.
yeah.
And I
There's
don't
so
know if
much,
we're meant to know all of it.
right?
I don't know.
Because my understanding so far in what I've started to read lately about ascended masters is that there's a whole, yeah, organization to them and groups and councils of light that help people. So I'm assuming that's where you go, and that's where the whole team is assembled and the whole contract, soul contract is signed, and you're like, okay, this is the game plan, this is what we're doing, this is your team, and there
Yeah.
you go. So that's where that happens at that level. But then the council is also like facilitating all that work and at the same time
Right.
helping at the collective level. So there's the individual mission of the individual human, with their team, but there's also humanity at large
Yes.
that needs to go somewhere, and it's also on a mission to go and to evolve, to go back to source, whatever you want to call it. So they're on like both aspects, at the collective level of helping humanity get somewhere, and
Yes.
then at the individual level helping particular souls do particular things for that end goal. So yeah,
Yeah. It's so
gets bigger and
mind-boggling.
bigger the more you think about it.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of reminds me of, if you've ever seen a video where it's like you're zoomed in into like the cell and into like the to the point of you see the single atom, but then you zoom out and you see the cell, and then you see the
Yeah,
cell is part of a tissue and it's part of the body, and you zoom out and then you see the person who's in this like neighborhood, and it zooms out, zooms out until you're in outer space and you see Earth, but then you keep zooming out and you see the whatever, the
yeah,
galaxy and whatever. It just keeps going and going and going and
never stops.
just never stops. And I've that's what this feels like
Yeah,
in some
it does. It
level.
does. It never ends. I saw that. I actually saw that this week, and it
Oh,
was just that we're supposed to be inside a black hole, or that's kind of one of the theories that's out there now.
oh
That
wow.
because of the way galaxies are moving and rotating together, the theory there is that it all makes sense with the black hole dynamics and how they work.
Oh,
So apparently we're inside a black hole, and then it's part of something bigger. It just never stops.
that's
We're
so
never gonna know. That's so crazy, isn't it? I
how do
just
you
want
get out of a black hole? Like,
we
how do you,
don't. I think that's the thing.
oh wow.
We don't.
That's insane.
You go in there and we just don't know what's in there because there's no way of going out. And also there's the
Whoa.
that's a fun word to say in English, spaghettification. So
Mm.
you just become anything. Gravity is so strong that you just become nothing, I guess,
Oh,
as you go in and just become part of it. I don't
that's
know, Christina.
crazy.
It's just my astrophysics only go so far. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's no going out. That much I know.
No going out. That's so interesting to me. Just like, yeah. Anyways.
And then yeah, in the scale, universal scale, there's so much potential for life, all sorts of life. If you add dimensions to it, I mean, it's limitless. So yeah,
Yeah.
whoever these people are, wherever they are, we're just uh, yeah,
Just a little
such a
speck.
small yeah, we're a speck in the cosmos. So it's just funny to think about even humanity at large is such a small thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And that just kind of, yeah, opens up the door to just imagining like what else is out there and like the beings that exist. And like you said, like if then you add dimensions to it all, and it's just kind of
It
like,
gets crazy. Yeah,
that's so
our
crazy.
brains can't comprehend that scale.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so talking about levels, and again, this is probably another deep dive. But when we look at realms,
Mm-hmm.
we also have cosmic angels and Herschel angels and
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of other organizations
Yeah.
of angels that work, yeah, at a larger scale.
Yes. Yes. So the way that I see it, or the way that it's been shown to me, is that there is the personal angels and we have universal angels. And the personal ones are the ones that are here for you. It's kind of like they're assigned to you, like guardian angels, like we've talked about. There's also seraphim angels that exist in that category, where seraphim are
Yeah,
individual to you, which I feel like that's
yeah,
a
yeah.
whole episode dedicated to seraphim.
This was one of the big discoveries of yeah, when I started to dive into this world, and I just couldn't believe, because for like in traditional, I guess, cosmology or whatever, it's just such an abstract, even when you read their description, how they're described is like this eye with
Oh my
wings and
gosh.
fire. It just is just the weirdest, most abstract idea of an angel. This is so not, yeah, not
Yeah.
human like.
Yeah.
It's so foreign. So when you describe them as personal angels, I mean, like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? This thing. And also not the one, but several. that are part
Yes.
of your team even. Like that
Yes.
was wild to me.
Yes, I know. It's so interesting because when I started to teach about them, and even in general, like when guardian, the stuff about guardian angels came through at the beginning of my journey in the spiritual work, and then later on seraphim and all that, it was like that information came through, and I was like, wow, this is very different than what's ever been really out there, or what's taught, or what's mainstream, and it just felt like I feel personally like I want to disrupt people's perception of what seraphim, what people typically think of as seraphim angels, because to me they're completely different than what is, what, like you said, like what's in the Bible or whatever, like what is
Mhm.
typically thought of. And yeah, and they are personal angels supporting healers and light workers specifically. But we can get into that in a whole episode because I feel like we can just deep dive into all sorts of things around seraphim. And then on the other side, you have the universal angels, which are angelic beings like the archangels, like the Herschel angels, and cosmic angels. And when I say universal, to me, that just means that anyone can call on them. So you can call on them, I can call on them, anyone can call on them, everyone can call on them at the same time. And because they're not bound by space or time, they can support all of us all at the
Yeah.
same time.
Hmm.
And the universal, excuse me, the universal angels, they have a purpose or a role that's more like I was saying before. I mean, they all are connected to that divine will, but they're more concerned on a collective level. What's happening with humanity? How is the consciousness of humanity evolving and shifting and changing? So they're kind of more of that like bigger scale type of support, you know, versus our personal angelic guides, guardian angels, and seraphim. They're more concerned about our development and our evolution so that we can fulfill our purpose within that bigger divine plan. So it's all connected, but it's
Yeah,
just more of like a focus of like the personal angels are more focused on you, like more inward towards you and your development, versus the universal angels that have more of this outward focus of what is happening in terms of evolution as a whole for humanity and for our consciousness.
it's just, yeah, wild. Okay, going back to the team, okay, just keeping it more approachable. Going back to our guide. So, what are your personal techniques or the ways that you connect with your guides? And again, because there's so many different characters and we don't really know what they're up to, like, because with angels, I mean, you have a sense of when to connect with your guardian angels and what for. Similar with archangels, you're like, oh, it's a health issue, so Raphael, or
Hmm.
protection, Michael. But when it comes to guides, like, how do you even work with them, or
Yeah,
like, what do you call
yeah, that's a great question. And I feel like, well, the first thing is to understand how they're here to support you. So, because once you understand how they are here to support you, then it makes it a lot easier for you to know specifically when to call on them. So, for example, I bet you that anyone listening who is a writer, for example, you have a guide who is supporting you with your writing, like a
that?
thousand percent in some shape or
Interesting.
form. So, oftentimes there'll be guides who support these specific types of skills or ways in which you are meant to work or bring through expression or whatever kind of a thing, So that's just one example. There's also guides who, I mean, you could have guides for literally anything, anything when it comes to your personal work and development. Some guides will support your divine feminine or divine masculine on the flip side, and in evolving that and helping you to connect with that energy. Some are connected to sacred wisdom. Like I've seen guides come through who have this sort of like Native American type of vibe where they're bringing in this very, like kind of plant medicine or just this like sacred energy that they bring to, your knowledge and expansion and awareness. So, all that to say, the first step when you are connecting with a spirit guide or meeting them is to ask, either depending on your level of how comfortable you are with receiving messages directly, or if you're someone who's new, regardless, you could ask them, how are you here to help me? Or help me to understand how you're here to help me. Something along those lines, where you're asking it in a way where you're releasing the pressure of needing to receive something in that moment. You know, sometimes we can get too caught up in, I'm not receiving an answer, so I'm not getting anything. So instead of that, like, being the thing that keeps you stuck, instead you can say, well, show me, help me to understand it in some way, and just letting it go. And then in your everyday life, that insight will start to come through. Maybe it comes through in dreams. Maybe you just have an aha moment. Maybe you're meditating one day and it drops in. So it releases the pressure to receive the answer in that moment. And instead, it opens you up to just inviting that awareness, but also just being open and trusting that the awareness will come through whenever it comes through, kind of a thing. So that would be the first thing that I'd say when you're connecting with spirit guides, is asking how they're here to help you, because then that gives you more focus and direction to then work with them in a specific way. Because like I said, most of the time they have a more specific role versus just whatever, like just a spirit guide who's just guiding me. Like there's usually a very direct focus for their
Yeah.
guidance.
Okay, that's good. And how is that different to the work of ancestors?
I love that. I feel like with ancestors, there's usually some tie to the actual lineage or the bloodline. So I find that often with ancestral work, there's something that existed. Like if you think of your ancestral line, like let's just say your maternal ancestors that come through your mother's line, there will often be some sort of conditioning or pattern or wound or something that is passed down. And so usually ancestral work is really about helping you to become empowered in whatever way that disempowerment might have lived in your bloodline, to change that and to transmute that energy so that you're now changing the bloodline, essentially, so that, you know, and it works both ways. So if you have kids, then of course it gets passed down into to your kids. But then if you don't have kids, it's still your healing that you do within yourself. It's still energetically affects your bloodline going backwards, like going, you know,
I
to
was gonna
past
say, so
ancestors.
essentially, you're either healing with ancestors, you're essentially healing the past and
You're
your bloodline, like whatever you're bringing forth. And then with guides, it's more about moving forward and getting to that next something
Yeah,
and where you're
yeah,
trying to go.
exactly.
Okay, interesting. That's a great distinction because it's like, yeah, a ghost is a ghost. Like,
Exactly. And then you do, I mean, like just talking about that, there are those spirits that just are there. They're not here to support or guide. They literally are as a ghost
yeah,
because
they're not
for
doing
some
anything.
reason they are stuck in this physical plane because they chose to hold on to something, or they're attached to something, or whatever the thing is, they did not let go. And so they are here, they're kind of like stuck in this physical plane, so to speak, until they choose to move through the process to leave. So there
Hmm.
is that distinction when someone passes, it's like their spirit goes through whatever they go through, but there is that sense of like, as I almost say, as like you walk through the door, like you move into the other plane where you're more of that in like spirit guide mode, and more in that sense of what, like the next phase of your soul's journey and the next phase of your soul's purpose. Whereas if a spirit, for whatever reason, usually it's trauma, usually it's unprocessed whatever things that make it feel really attached to the physical plane, and it stays stuck, it's almost like your journey has now paused in a way. Like that soul's journey has paused because they're not moving forward now. They're attached in this plane. And
Yeah.
so until they decide, they use their free will to unattach themselves and actually move forward, they're just gonna stay here. And then it's the ghost stories like you hear, you know, of like
Yeah.
these
Those are
things happening.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And so essentially, you either have a job or you don't have a job. It's just, I was thinking about it and I was laughing internally because I was just thinking it's so sad. You, even on the other side, you're still working.
Yeah.
It never stops. So you even move on, and then you still have some sort of work to do. And if you don't, then I guess you're just stuck here, like wondering until
Yeah.
you move on. There's no vacation, no way.
No, there's no time off, no
There's
paid
no
time off over here.
death. You still have a role. That's so interesting. But not every. But no, maybe that's a lie or something that just came through immediately was like, no, not everyone has a job. So I guess there's people that can cross over and just whatever.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like the people who do fully cross over
Yeah,
and like don't
but are
stay
not
stuck
necessarily
here.
coming back or being a guide or doing
Yeah,
anything. Just moving
it
on.
feels like they're yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing over
I
there.
don't know. But as soon as I said you either have a job or you don't, I heard like not necessarily like no, not
Yeah.
everyone has a job.
Yeah.
You can take time off if you want to. I'm hoping that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I share this story with you? So I usually have that connection, that ability that when someone crosses over a family member, I'll usually have a visitation in a dream, and
Mhm.
I'll be able to have an exchange with them, and I take it as I'm the person that they are able to like say we're on the other side, we're
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
I sort of pass that on to my family. So um one of the time it was really beautiful. So it was this aunt, she crossed over, and then the way that she showed me where she was at, we were on this train, and we were on the train, and then I heard her on the loudspeaker, and she was just passing on a message for my cousins and things, and I heard her voice, but I didn't physically see her. But I heard her, and she passed in a message, and then it was time for me to get off the train. And I got off the train, and I was in the station. I could see where the train was going, though, and it was the most beautiful. I can still see it in my mind. It was the most beautiful city, silver city, like inside like clouds, and it was just it was just the most beautiful place, and just the train was heading there too, and I knew that's where she was
Oh my
at.
gosh. I just got chills as you were
Me
saying
too.
that.
Me too. So I sort of, and she showed me that, and I've had experiences with my grandma, with my grandpa, and with several people, but that was the clearest that I've ever been able to see like the actual place, because I've usually been
Yeah.
in rooms, and there's a
Yeah.
certain kind of light in the air, and I can even feel it. It's just, when you see a sunset and it's just that kind of glow, but it's
Yes.
not really that hard on your eyes. It's that time of day. It's just that's the lighting, and that's what I sense, and I know that I'm there. That's where they're at. It's just
Mm.
very comforting, very warm. The light's perfect, the temperature's perfect. So I'm like, okay, this is their environment. But that was the one time that I was not like enclosed in a room, but I was able to see like the thing, and it was the most gorgeous silver city in the clouds, and it was just, again, like a sunset, like the dawn. It was like it had colors and golden, pinkish. I don't. It was just beautiful. I can't even describe it. But anyway, I saw the city and I saw the place. So I guess you could just go and be in one of those places and just chill and just rest and make decisions about your next adventure, and not necessarily be here as a guide for other people.
Yeah, exactly. Because I do feel like as you're sharing that and as we're talking about this, I do feel like there's a sense of like bliss, like just enjoyment,
Yes.
of just being, in that there's just this enjoyment. And for whatever reason, which is hard to understand because obviously we don't consciously right now remember what that realm is like. But I do also get the sense that we choose to incarnate as humans because we're like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful here to be as a human, which
Mhm.
is interesting because of that duality too of like, yes, it's
It's
beautiful and
so
also
hard.
so hard. Like, why are we human? Why do we choose this?
I want to go back.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting to me to think about like what is different. Like are the colors so much brighter here? Is it because we can physically touch things, which in that
It must
realm,
be,
we
yeah.
can't. So we're like, I must experience physical touch. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, there
What
are
are
going to
you
be certain
thinking?
things that are appealing, and just Earth. It is just a beautiful place. I mean, trees and
Yeah.
birds and
Yeah.
mountains, and it's just beautiful. I have this other memory of being somewhere else. It was definitely not Earth. It was somewhere else, and what I took from it, besides everything wild that happened during that experience, it was like I saw the my surroundings, and there was like this one sad looking tree, and I couldn't see a lot of vegetation, and it was just kind of not barren because it was beautiful modern. I don't know how to describe it anyway, but there were no trees, and there were nature wise it was just like bleh.
Oh.
And I was like, I remember even in that moment, because it was almost a memory, and in that moment, and I was thinking like, oh, Earth is so much more beautiful. Like, we have trees and mountains, and if you could
Yeah.
see like the view here is amazing. So I just remember very clearly like the comparison to me was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, well, this is nice, but
Yeah.
Earth is great. So I guess
Yeah.
all in all, it's just a special, beautiful, unique place, and we get to come here and experience it. And yeah,
Yeah. It's
just have
so
this weird experience. And it's as hard as it is, there's so much beauty.
There really is. Yeah, absolutely. So much beauty. I mean, you just look outside, like nature is just the perfect example of that. You just look at a flower and you're like, whoa, like how, like this color that this flower is right now and how the petals are formed. Like, you could just go so, you know,
When I can tap into that connection with the divine and with God, and whenever I've had, I don't know how to explain it, but times in my life when I felt like I'm uh, that vibration, I'm connected
mm,
to the divine, and I'm like, it's seconds, like, and then I lose it. I'm like, ah, that's it. But it's usually when I'm in nature or like a beautiful something that I'm looking at, and I'm like, or a beautiful sunset, and I'm like, good job. This is
yeah,
beautiful. Like, but I tend to have that internal dialogue, and I'm like, oh my God, you did a great job here. This is
yes,
beautiful. And that's when I sort of get to connect. The beauty of nature usually connects me to God and to
yeah.
that vibration or whatever you want to call it. And I have this one moment. I remember we were on a road trip traveling to a different city. We were in the middle of the road, and in Colombia we have just beautiful mountains, and we were traveling there, and it was like suns no, it was really early in the morning, so we were seeing the sun come out essentially, and the mountains look almost as a painting.
Oh
And I
wow.
was I was trying, and I was it was my A Course in Miracles era. So I was
Yes.
listening to A Course in Miracles during this trip, looking at those mountains, and I had seconds. But I had that moment of like, this is God, this is it.
Wow.
Just, and that was the first moment when I was like, oh my God, good job.
Yeah.
This is beautiful. And then ever since, like in remembrance to that moment of that strong connection that I had, whenever I see something beautiful in nature, I just
Just like
make it a
stop
point to
and
tell God and to tell the divine that, oh my God, I get it. This is
that's so
hard, awful,
cool.
all of the things, but this is also so beautiful and so magnificent.
Yeah.
Good
I love that so much. It's so true because yeah, I feel like if you really do stop and take a moment to take it in those moments, like we have those experiences and like you said, it doesn't necessarily last for a long time, but it's like seconds where you're just like it's almost feels like a tapped in or like plugged in a
Yeah, you
remembrance.
plug in for a few seconds and it's like, this is it. This is God. That
Yeah.
mountain in front of me, or
Yes.
that whatever. And it all clicks. It all makes sense for a second, but
Yeah.
you can connect
For a second
to
it
source.
makes sense.
For a second, you connect to source, and you're like, I know what I'm here. I needed to see this
Yeah,
in human
exactly.
form. There's no other way to see this. So I
Yes.
think you just take it in, and
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what that reminds me of too is seeing my kids when, like, one of the things
Mm,
that we like to do is we just go out for a walk, like just around the neighborhood, just like walking around and whatever. And they'll just stop for like the flowers on the bush, like, let me look at the flower, like, oh, the leaves, like this rock on the ground. Like, they'll just stop for every little thing.
yeah.
Like when we're going to walk, I'm not trying to get anywhere. I know that we're going to walk slow. We're going to stop every 5 seconds and we're going to look at everything. But just you sharing that story made me think about how they stop for every little thing and to
Everything.
look at everything. And to me, I think that similar, like taking on that lens from a child's perspective of, oh, look at this leaf, this is so cool, like what colors are here, or this flower or whatever the thing is. And to from that perspective of just being very present and just taking it
Mhm.
in, and how that is so connected.
Absolutely. I think that's the point. If there's a point to this,
Yeah.
I think that's it. That's the whole point of being here and being human, is just having this experience. And I think we have this exact we landed here at some point in one of our conversations. It's like
Yeah.
we just don't know. There might not be, like, yeah, flowers and birds and ice cream in the next place. So this is very unique. This is only lasts so long. So yeah, stop
Yeah.
and smell the flowers and everything from that kid perspective, everything being brand new and just taking it in for the magical, special, beautiful thing that it is. And you normalize things and you get used to your environment and you get caught up in life and things. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're here and there's flowers. I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
special and unique in itself. And just to, yeah, try and use that as a connection to the divine.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think that's why we all on some level just feel so much more at peace in nature. And I feel like, for some people it's the ocean, for others it's the mountain or the forest or whatever the thing is, but
Mm,
whatever your thing is in nature, but just, yeah, it's like a reminder of coming back to that, because then from there, no matter what chaos or what craziness or uncertainties or questions are swirling around in your everyday life, it's like when you come back to that, it all somehow makes sense, or in the very least, it all makes it feel like you're going to be okay. Like, what, even if you
yeah.
don't know the solution yet, you're going to be okay. You're safe. It's okay. You're going to be okay. There's a team that's surrounding you and supporting you, and the divine, and just being in that moment, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I
Oh,
think
I
that's
love
it. I think we
this.
did
So
it.
good. Yes, so good. So good. What question do we want to ask our listeners of this conversation?
Question.
I want to hear people's experiences with their spirit guides, and kind of just
Yeah.
like that evolution of, how that has shown up for you, or, how that has evolved for you.
How are they
You know,
supporting you? How do you communicate with them?
mhm.
And it's just several. Is the one is like, how did you experience that in your life? Let us know. We're really curious.
Yes, yes. Let's continue this conversation in the comments. I think it's, yeah, so important, so amazing. And as always, if you guys have any questions too, just is sparked from our conversations that we're having, feel free to post that in the comment section too, because we can continue the conversation there, or it might be an inspiration for a future episode to keep unraveling certain rabbit holes that we like to go down. So we can continue to do that. And then, as always, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to give it a thumbs up, rate the podcast on your favorite podcast app, share this with your friends, with your family, and make sure you're subscribed to this channel or following us on the podcast apps. And yeah, this was so good. I love this.
That's so fun. Thank you so much.
Yay, amazing. We'll see you guys later next time.
Later.